The palace of the Iron Claw Kingdom stood tall beneath a pale silver moon. Its towers reached into the night sky like fingers made of stone. Celine Vaughn stepped out of the carriage and looked up at the great doors. Tonight she would become the wife of Alpha King Damien Ironclaw. Tonight she would become a queen. She had never met the man she was about to marry. The marriage was arranged to bring peace between two lands. Her father ruled the wide border territory to the north, and Damien ruled this old kingdom in the south. For years there had been tension between them. This wedding was meant to end all of that. Two families joined together, two lands made one. Celine wore a gown of soft white with tiny silver threads woven through it. Her dark hair was pinned with small pearls. She looked calm on the outside, but her heart was beating fast. She had heard stories about Damien. Some said he was cold, some said he was proud, but she had hoped, deep down, that behind those stories there was a good man waiting to be known. The ceremony took place in the grand hall. Hundreds of guests filled the rows of carved wooden benches. Candles glowed everywhere, casting warm gold light on the walls. Celine walked slowly toward the front, where Damien stood waiting. He was tall and strong, with dark hair and sharp eyes. He was handsome, there was no doubt about that, but when Celine reached his side and looked up at him, he barely glanced at her. His eyes were somewhere else. She followed his gaze and saw a woman sitting in the front row. The woman wore a bright red dress that stood out against all the pale colors around her. She had a small, knowing smile on her lips. Her name, Celine would soon learn, was Ravenna. The vows were spoken. Damien said the words without feeling, like a man reading from a page he did not care about. Celine said her own words clearly and gently. When the ceremony ended, the crowd clapped, but Damien turned away before the sound had even faded. The feast that followed was grand. There was music and dancing and tables piled high with food. Yet Celine sat alone at the head table while her new husband spent the whole evening speaking and laughing with Ravenna. Celine watched quietly. She noticed many things that night. She noticed how thin some of the servants looked. She noticed how the older council members sat in the corners, ignored and unhappy. She noticed how the guards looked tired, and how their uniforms were worn. This was a kingdom that looked golden on the surface, but underneath, something was broken. When the feast ended, Celine was led to the bridal chamber. It was a beautiful room with a large window that looked out over the moonlit gardens. She sat on the edge of the bed and waited. She told herself that perhaps now, in private, Damien would speak to her kindly. Perhaps they could begin to know each other. Perhaps this marriage could still become something real. The door opened. Damien walked in, but he did not sit. He stood by the door with his arms crossed. "I will speak plainly," he said. "This marriage is only a treaty. My heart belongs to Ravenna, and it always will. You are here because your father and my council wished it, nothing more." Celine stood slowly. "I understand that we did not choose each other," she said, "but we are married now. Could we not at least try to build something between us?" Damien shook his head. "There is nothing to build. Tonight, and every night, I will be with the woman I love." He turned to leave. "You may stay in the palace. You will have your title, but you will have nothing of me." Then he did something that Celine would never forget. He walked back into the great hall, where many guests still lingered, and he announced before all of them that he would spend his wedding night with his mistress. He said it loudly, without shame. Some of the crowd laughed. Others looked away, uncomfortable and quiet. Celine stood in the doorway of the chamber and heard it all. Her face did not change. She did not cry. She did not shout. She simply watched. She watched every face that laughed. She watched every noble who looked away, and in her mind she remembered each one. What Damien did not know was that Celine was far more than the daughter of a border lord. She was the last living heir of the ancient Silver Moon bloodline. Long ago, before the Iron Claw kings ever rose, the Silver Moon line had been the first rulers of these lands. Their blood carried old strength and old rights that the kingdom's oldest laws still honored. Her father had not sent her south only as a bride. He had sent her as a quiet answer to years of insult and neglect. And the treaty that Celine had signed that very morning held a clause that Damien had never bothered to read. Celine knew the clause well. It stated that the marriage must be honored on its first night. If the vow of the wedding night was broken in public dishonor, then by the kingdom's ancient law, full authority over the kingdom would pass to the wronged bride. It was an old law, written in a time when honor meant everything. Most people had forgotten it existed, but Celine had not, and Damien, in his pride, had just broken it in front of the entire court. She did not waste the night in tears. She changed out of her wedding gown into a simple dark dress. Then she began to move through the sleeping palace, with quiet purpose. Her first visit was to the council elders. These were the wise old men and women who had once helped guide the kingdom. Damien had pushed them aside years ago, calling them slow and useless. Celine found them in their quarters, awake and restless. She sat with them and spoke honestly. She told them who she truly was. She showed them the old records of the Silver Moon line. She showed them the treaty clause. Their tired eyes grew wide with understanding. "For years you have been ignored," Celine said gently. "For years, this kingdom has grown weaker while its king thought only of himself. I am offering you something different. I am offering you respect. I am offering you a voice again." The elders listened. They had waited a long time for someone to listen to them, and now someone had come who was willing to listen in return. Next, Celine went to the barracks where the warriors slept. Many of them were hungry, their pay long overdue. She spoke with their captain, a strong and honest woman named Mira, who had served the kingdom faithfully for many years. Celine promised food, fair pay, and honor restored. Mira studied her carefully. "Why should we trust you?" Mira asked. "You arrived only today." "Because I am the only one offering you anything at all," Celine answered. "Look around you. You defend a king who does not even remember your names. I will remember. I will see that you are fed and paid. That is not a promise for the future. It begins tonight." And it did. Celine had brought gold of her own from her father's lands, and she gave what she could that very night to prove her words were real. Warm bread was carried to the barracks before dawn. The warriors ate, and as they ate, they began to believe. Then Celine visited the treasury keeper, an anxious old man named Corin. He had been forced to hide a terrible secret for a long time, and it had worn him down. When Celine spoke to him kindly and promised him safety, the truth spilled out of him like water from a cracked jar. For years, Ravenna had been quietly stealing from the royal treasury. She had taken gold meant for the warriors, gold meant for the people, gold meant for repairs to the crumbling kingdom. Corin had records of every missing coin, hidden away because he was too afraid to speak. Now, at last, he handed those records to Celine. Celine held the proof in her hands and understood everything. The kingdom was poor not because of bad harvests or bad luck, but because it had been robbed from the inside while the king looked the other way. All through the night, Celine worked. She met with nobles who were tired of Damien's selfishness. She spoke with servants who had suffered in silence. She gathered the council, the warriors, the treasury keeper, and the honest nobles together, and she showed them all the same things: her true bloodline, the ancient law, the treaty clause, and the proof of Ravenna's theft. One by one they came to her side, not out of fear but out of hope. They had lived without hope for so long that when it finally appeared, they reached for it with both hands. By the time the first light of dawn touched the towers of the palace, everything had changed, and Damien slept through all of it, never knowing that the ground had shifted beneath him. When the morning sun rose fully over the kingdom, trumpets sounded through the halls. Damien woke with a start. He rose, confused and annoyed, and made his way toward the great hall to see what the noise was about. What he found there stopped him cold. Celine sat upon the throne. She wore a gown of deep silver now, and her back was straight and her face was calm. Around her stood the council elders, the honest nobles, and Captain Mira with her warriors. They did not bow to Damien as he entered. They stood with Celine. Damien stared. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. "Get off my throne." Celine did not move. Instead, she lifted the treaty in her hand and began to read aloud, clearly and slowly, so that every word could be heard. She read the clause about the wedding night. She read the ancient law of the kingdom. She explained, in simple words that no one could misunderstand, that by breaking the honor of the marriage in public, Damien had, by the kingdom's own law, passed all authority to her. The hall was silent. Damien's face went pale as the meaning became clear. He looked around for support and found none. The people he had ignored for years now stood against him, not with anger, but with quiet certainty. "This is a trick," Damien said, though his voice had lost its strength. "It is not a trick," Celine answered. "It is your own law, written by your own ancestors, agreed to by your own hand this very morning. You did not read it. That is not my fault. I am simply holding you to your word." Then she raised the treasury records. "For years, gold has been stolen from this kingdom. Gold meant for your warriors, who went hungry. Gold meant for your people, who suffered. That gold was taken by Ravenna." At the mention of her name, Ravenna, who had crept into the hall behind Damien, tried to slip away. But the warriors were already there. Coran stepped forward with the records, and the proof was too clear to deny. Ravenna was taken to be held and judged fairly by the council. She was no longer the woman in the red dress, who smiled from the front row. She was simply someone who had done wrong, and now had to answer for it. Damien stood alone in the center of the hall. Only hours ago, he had made Celine stand in humiliation before this same court. Now it was he who stood exposed, stripped of the power he had never truly earned. He looked at Celine with something new in his eyes. Not love, not yet, but a dawning understanding of what he had thrown away. Celine could have punished him harshly. The law was on her side, and few would have argued if she had chosen to be cruel. But that was not the kind of ruler she wished to be. She had watched cruelty and neglect nearly destroy this kingdom. She would not build her rule on the same broken stones. "Damien Ironclaw," she said, "you have lost your crown by your own choices, but I will offer you a choice of your own. You may leave this kingdom and live in quiet exile, free, but far from here. Or you may stay, not as king, but as an advisor. You may work to earn back the honor you have lost, day by day, through service to the people you once ignored. The choice is yours." Damien was quiet for a long moment. The proud man who had laughed at her the night before seemed smaller now, and also, strangely, more human. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why show me any mercy at all?" "Because a kingdom built on revenge will never heal," Celine said, "and I intend to heal this one." In the days that followed, the kingdom began to change. Celine ruled with a steady and fair hand. The stolen gold that could be recovered was returned. The warriors were paid and fed. The council elders were given their voices back, and they served gladly. Repairs began on the crumbling walls and roads. The servants who had suffered in silence found that their new queen actually saw them, actually cared. Slowly, life returned to the tired old kingdom, like color returning to a faded painting. Damien chose to stay. He took the role of advisor, and to the surprise of many, he did not complain. He worked, he listened, he walked among the people he had once ignored, and began to understand them. It was not an easy path, and no one made it easy for him, but bit by bit, he began to change into the kind of man he might have been all along, if pride had not blinded him for so long. He often watched Celine as she ruled, and he saw clearly now what he had been too foolish to see on their wedding night. The woman he had cast aside was strong, and wise, and kind in a way that could not be faked. She had turned her greatest humiliation into her greatest victory, and she had done it not with anger, but with courage and clever thought. Whether Damien would ever earn a place at her side, truly, was a question that hung in the air, unanswered. Celine made no promises to him. She had learned not to give her heart before it was earned, but she did not close the door completely either. She let time do its quiet work. And so the woman who had been chosen last, mocked and dismissed on her wedding night, became the ruler of the kingdom by the light of the very next dawn. She had come south believing she might find love and found betrayal instead, but out of that betrayal, she had built something greater than she had ever imagined. Not just a title, and not just a throne, but a chance to lift up an entire land that had been suffering in the dark. She had learned the most important lesson of all. Dignity is not something to be begged for or wept over when it is taken away. It is something to be claimed, quietly and with courage, by those brave enough to reach for it. And Celine Vaughn, last heir of the Silver Moon line, had claimed hers in full.